Hello everyone, I'm Master Denes Boros, and this is the game 11 between Nepo and Magnus Carlsen. So Nepo actually went into this match at this game to go and try to get closer, an inch closer, and maybe try to nip away from that -3 score. So e4, e5, Carlsen is trying to keep it solid. Knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, and that is a huge deviation from the whole match. The first half of the Magnus-Jan match actually was all about the marshal, bishop b5, and actually without too much success. Nepo did get a bit of advantage there, but not too much, and didn't really quite bother Carlsen. Bishop c4, so this is the new attempt, going for the Italian like he did with the English, trying to get to something not as well trodden. Knight f6, d3, bishop c5, c3, d6, very standard, has been seen before, and a5. And a5 is somewhat of a unique and newish move. People used to play castles, but then they kind of realized there's some dangers with bishop g5 and this pin. So instead, Carlsen goes for a5, tucks his bishop away on a7, and is waiting for Nepo to show intentions. Because if you go bishop g5 now, black is much more comfortable pushing these pawns with the king not already committed on the g8 square. Rook e1, bishop a7, still waiting for Jan to decide and show his hands. Jan goes knight a3, actually a new idea. With the bishop leaving that square, the knight is ready to get closer towards the all-important d5 square. h6, taking away that move. Knight c2, castles. So Carlsen actually managed to get a position with a relative safety, maybe with a slight advantage for Nepo, but not quite a lot. Bishop e3, takes, knight takes c3, rook e8. And this is, again, maximum Magnus at his best, going for the bishop e6 idea, but not going immediately, because that could lead to long-term trouble due to bad structure and doubled pawns. Yes, black gets some play on the f-file, but that doesn't quite fit the match situation, so Carlsen rather wants to capture with the rook instead, which is, of course, less risky. a4, bishop e6, and bishop takes e6 was played by Nepo, but that kind of shows that Nepo sort of gave up on this match by this point. Bishop b5 still would lead to something of an unbalanced game. Bishop takes, rook takes e6, very consistent in b3, b6, and even though black is a little bit worse, but it's nothing unsurmountable. Rook d1, knight e7, getting the knight to a very good square. Queen d7, bringing the rook on in. Knight h2, knight g4, trades. And here, Magnus follows the old adage, your opponent is playing on the sides, you strike in the center, as all of your pieces are ready to get into action. d4, e takes d4, e takes d5, and rook e4 is actually a brilliant move, patrolling the whole fourth rank, attacking all of those pawns, and black has more than enough play for the mayhem that's happening in the center. So queen c2 is played a very, very clever move, trying to get that rook out of the way. Of course, you can't quite take here, because black is in time to capture the pawn with a better structure. Queen c2, rook f4, and Nepo, after some thought, made a very much inexplicable move, but it's sort of dictated by the match situation and the stress that involved the whole match, and goes for g3. Now g3 is objectively not good, but Nepo wants to try his last chance. Objectively, he should have taken, which would have led to a completely even position, which is of course still in favor of Magnus Carlsen. So therefore Nepo chose g3, trying to untangle black's position, just putting pressure on there. And of course, if rook f3, there's queen e4, and suddenly black is in trouble. But in comes d takes c3, g takes f4, queen takes g4 check, and black is of course having a huge attack with all of white's pieces still on vacation on the queen side. Now, it is a surprising choice, but it is understandable that Nepo still wanted to have a last hurrah. King f1, queen h3, king g1, and probably here captures, rook d6 would have been a much more simpler way to win, but Carlsen again does not want to give any slight chances and goes for the surefire way to get the advantage. So he actually is roaming in with the knight, and he knows and claims that this is surefire going to claim the advantage. d6, knight h4, check, knight f3. There are plenty of threats, including queen g1 obviously here. You can't take here because of queen g1, queen g2, checkmate. The king is in a tunnel and it can't run due to these pawns, that pawn on e3 and the rook on e1. Of course, that pawn is also unfortunately placed, and again, that is kind of the thing. You always want to have pawns sheltering your king. No wonder you can take a look at Carlsen's king side. It is very solid. So Nepomniachtchi saw the dangers, went for queen f2, check, check, captures, takes, rook takes d6, and I've seen many commentators claiming, well, why didn't he go for the winning line? Well, maybe it is winning, but if you miscalculate one single move, it could turn around, potentially. So there is nothing as safe at the World Championship level than a rook endgame up a pawn. King f3, rook d2. And not just he's up a pawn, he is also forcing this rook to get passive, and he has an outside passer on the king side. Rook b1, g6, rook a2. Again, first makes sure that white cannot move at all. If rook c4, then there is just c5. The rook is trapped. King e4, h5. Now the pawn is dashing down. Again, a little bit of restriction. Rook b3, h4, h3, h2. Takes. Rook b3 check, forcing to capture, queens, a5, and of course this looks a little bit technically difficult, but it's objectively winning, and Carlsen makes short work of Nepo here, king here. Of course you can't push because of queen e6 check, then you lose the rook. Queen e7, king a8. Checking would be ill-advised because of the idea of rook b8, and you're actually losing. So notice that even though Carlsen is winning, he is not rushing the game. He takes his time because you can still lose a winning position. King g7, very smart, moving away from danger. Rook b6, queen c5, and Nepomniachtchi resigned, which means that Carlsen reaches 7.5 points, claiming the World Championship title the 4th time yet again. And this shows how big of a player Magnus Carlsen is. He won a pivotal 6th game, which could have turned this whole event, this whole World Championship around if Carlsen were to suffer a defeat then. But it was not to be. It was a historic 7-hour game that ended up in the favor of the now world champion Magnus Carlsen. He actually scored 4 out of 5 in the upcoming after game 6, which shows that he is still the best player of the world. Who's going to be the next challenger? Really, we don't know. We have an expectation of seeing either Duda, Firouzja Rapport, or that new generation of Indian players, but we yet to know who will be the next challenger. But for now, Magnus Carlsen retains his title. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, definitely consider subscribing. And if you have any thoughts, comments, please post it below. Thank you so much. See you next time.